Now, the head of the Equality and Human Rights Commission has today defended controversial guidance saying transgender people can be legally excluded from single-sex spaces in certain scenarios. Kishore Faulkner said activists would not force a change in the guidance, which says that organisations such as refuges and gyms can legally prevent, limit or modify trans people's access to single-sex services in some circumstances, like preventing trauma, giving privacy or to ensure health and safety. But the decision sparked a backlash from trans groups and the LGBT plus charity Stonewall, which says that it's likely to cause more confusion and a greater risk of illegal discrimination. So I'm asking, should we create bespoke spaces for trans people? Well, I'm joined now by Debbie Hayton. She's a teacher and transgender campaigner. Debbie, thank you so much. We would have loved to get you in the studio. It's so annoying. A train was cancelled. It's so annoying. So listen, what do you think of the ruling by the Equalities Watchdog?
I welcome it. I welcome the ruling. It brings clarity to an area where we had so much confusion. And what always came across to me was it was the confusion that was causing mistrust, the mistrust which was causing fear, and the fear was causing anger. We need to go right back to the beginning, have clear guidance, clear rulings that we can all understand, and from that there may be a way to move forwards.
Well, I'm pleased to hear you say that, because coming from somebody who is transgender, of course transgender female, it's really good to hear that, because a lot of people may have expected you to say the opposite, actually. So I'm wondering, though, because I have heard people talking about this, especially a lot of trans people saying that they would feel sort of vulnerable if they were going into a separate space that wasn't a mixed space, and it sort of puts the spotlight on them and says, look, that person is trans going into a trans space, or that's an argument that I've heard. What's your thought on that?
Well, most spaces are mixed sex, of course. You know, in most situations in everyday life, we're all in the same space. We only have separate sex spaces when it is a proportionate means of achieving a legitimate aim, to use the legal term. That's the only time we do it, and it's been done because women, especially, need a separate space. Now, what we should be looking at is, can we set aside separate spaces for trans people as well, and work that way? So we've got two separate protected characteristics. We've got a protected characteristic of sex, one of gender reassignment, and we'll look at them separately. But what's been happening is it's all been put together in this confusion, so we don't really know what we mean by sex, what we mean by gender, what we mean by gender reassignment. All this language has been confused to the point where we need to step back and think, what are we trying to achieve here? And what we're trying to achieve is to ensure safety, but also dignity of women and trans, and in this case, in my case, trans women. Sometimes we can do it in a group together, but other times it's right to do it separately.
And what's your view on trans people in sport? Do you think in sport there should also be a separate category for people who are trans and non-binary?
Well, there's probably not enough of us in most situations. That's the problem. So I guess if I was, I'd be there in the 100 metres myself, because there's not too many trans people about. But what we could do there, and this has been mooted by a number of people, is to have an open category in which anybody can compete. Men, trans women, trans men, if they've had hormone therapy, women, if they want the competition, as long as it's safe, have that open category in which everybody can compete. But we all know, of course, what the issue of that would be for women. Women wouldn't tend to win very much. So have a separate female category for women alongside it. And then everybody can compete, everybody can take part in sport, but crucially, we don't then have to judge between women and trans women who have very, very different biology. And let's face it, sport was never divided because of people's feelings. It's divided because people have different biology, and we need to accept that reality.
OK, well, listen, Debbie, thank you so much for talking to us, and thank you so much for your views. That's Debbie Hayton. She's a teacher and transgender campaigner. Right, now, I'm asking this question. Should we create bespoke spaces for trans people? The Health Secretary, Sajid Javid, has urged the NHS to adopt a new guidance from the Equalities Watchdog, saying that transgender people can be legally excluded from single-sex spaces in certain scenarios. And the Equality and Human Rights Commission says that organisations such as refuges and gyms can legally prevent, limit or modify trans people's access to single-sex services in some circumstances, like to prevent trauma, give privacy or to ensure health and safety. So what do you think? What is your view? Should we create bespoke places? Let's see what my panel make of that. I'm joined now by comedian Leo Kearse and also Conservative commentator Calvin Robinson. Right, Calvin, what do you think? Bespoke places for trans people?
Are they needed? Is there a demand for this, or are we preempting something? How many trans people are there in the country? Do we need to go around every single restaurant, every single facility and create a space for people that don't exist? I'm not sure there is a demand for it. But what is interesting about this case is that the head of diversity, equality and inclusion at the NHS said bin the government's guidance on this. She said reject the Equalities and Human Rights Commission clarification in the law. That's not right. That's political activism. That is putting people at risk. The whole point of a single-sex space is that it's single-sex. This is about sex. It's not about gender. Yeah. As Debbie said earlier on, it's not about feelings, it's about biology. And there are clear biological differences between males and females, and that's what we're talking about here. So it's actually about protecting female spaces more than anything. And I'm all for trans rights, I'm all for human rights, I'm all for everyone's rights to live their lives as they see fit, but we should not put women at risk. We should not put females at risk.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I've got to agree with Calvin on this one. I mean, I think the one point I'd make is we could make space for trans-only spaces if we got rid of every equality, diversity and inclusion department. And they're completely unnecessary. They don't benefit anything to society. They're intrinsically and systemically racist, sexist, not homophobic, but straightophobic. They're looking for anybody who's on the oppression pyramid of exaltation. They're looking for anybody who's on that to pluck them and give them all these opportunities that would be denied, anybody who's straight or white or anything else that's seen as bad these days.
How would you know?
What's that?
How would you know?
How would I know? Are you saying? Well, yeah. I'm actually a genderqueer pansexual.
What does that mean?
I've no idea.
This is a new one. This is a new one on me. I don't know. Have you heard of that?
Well, this is the thing. So much of this stuff. I mean, fair enough. Genuine transgender people should obviously, be able to use the ladies' toilet.
Why?
Because they've put the effort in and they're basically...
It's not about
what's that got to do with it? What's that got to do with it?
This is...
No, you said... Look, Calvin said it's about safety. It's about security for women. If that's the case, then...
Genuine transgender women aren't a threat.
But how would you... Yeah, but that's not the point, though, is it? The reason why is that... So they are protected, but also the women are protected. No, you don't know... You don't know, though, do you? You don't know who's genuine and who isn't. So to protect people from the disingenuous ones...
This is the problem. Do that. This is the problem. I mean, it's got to be dealt with on a case-by-case basis. There's this grey area in the middle where, obviously you've got, genuine transgender people who've put the effort in on one side. Because I've got to be honest, like some of the even Tara Hewitt, the NHS Equality, Diversity and Inclusion, as soon as I saw her picture, I was like, oh my God,
but
that's the bassist from Iron Maiden. This is ridiculous.
This is very shallow.
This is, it's not shallow. This comes down to the root of it.
You're talking about how they look. We are talking about the different biological things within somebody who's transgender. So their physiology is, if it's a transgender female, their physiology is male.
What, you're going to check for ovaries?
Let me finish. So their physiology is male, so everything about them is male, including their hips are wider. Hang on.
They could have breasts.
I haven't finished.
Breasts aren't male.
Yeah, but the breasts may be there. But within every cell in their body, they are biologically male. And therefore, that means that in every respect, they are mostly and usually stronger than women. So that is why, in those respects, like certain single-sex spaces are usually...
What, are you going to ban strong women?
When that is the case, the reason why they've separated the sexes is usually to do with privacy, or it can be an issue to do with strength, or it will be an issue where it is clear that the sexes, one is biologically stronger or one has a biological advantage. That's when we separate the spaces. We don't do it otherwise normally. So here, let me finish. So the point is this. When that is the case, I think it's fair enough that those spaces are separated. And to keep the dignity of transgender people as well, I believe they should have their own space. Therefore, nobody feels at risk and everyone feels safer.
I want to pick up on that. Before I do, I want to hear what your definition of a genuine trans person is.
Somebody who's put the effort in.
How much effort?
A lot of effort. Because honestly, with some of them, I feel like I'm just at least meet me halfway. At least meet me. Why am I having to do your transition in my head? It's not my transition.
So for example,
I've got to do all this mental arithmetic.
If someone identifies as a trans woman, you said they've got breasts. Maybe they haven't finished the bottom half. They haven't finished the bottom half.
Wait, let them do this. I like this. No. So let's
act like a woman.
So start with the first. The first requirement in your list is what?
They've got to have breasts.
Have breasts. Second requirement. What is the next one?
They've got to be hot.
Third requirement.
They've got to have long hair.
Yeah, they've got to have long hair.
Makeup.
Yeah.
And sound like basically, if you look at a Motley Crue video from the 1980s, just one of the women from that.
Okay, so let me pick up on that.
This is ridiculous, really.
The reason we have to protect female spaces, hospitals, toilets, changing rooms, sports facilities, prisons, refuges, is because
are places where you'll find Calvin.
No, the reason we have to protect females in those spaces is because, as Nana was saying, men are biologically more powerful, but also there is a risk, and there is a risk of rape. And to be able to rape someone, you have to be able to penetrate someone. Now, you haven't said that they don't need a penis to become a trans woman. You haven't said that, and you've clearly said that you can still have a penis and be a woman. I don't think that's true, because I think if you are saying that, these people you've just identified as women would put genuine women, would put biological women at risk in those spaces.
Yeah, and that's the point. It's not about how they look. It's not about how far they've gone through the transition. It's just the physiology of somebody. Obviously, there's two ways, so it's not just always male to female.
I've never read a news story where a genuine transgender woman who's put the effort in and looks like a woman from a Motley Crue video has done any of these terrible things.
Yeah, but that's not the point, though. It's not.
It's always.
It's not about how they look. And actually, if the minority can have something changed for them, then if the women feel that, then they are also a majority. The majority of women, if the majority feel unsafe with that situation, then we have to be listening.
Yeah, and that's
the point.
That is the point. I think my wife's pregnant at the moment. And she gets literature sent to her, and it describes her as a birthing person, which makes her feel horrible.
Well,
it's reducing her to a biological function.
And so
why are we making a huge portion of the population feel horrible in order to prevent the supposed imposition on a tiny proportion of the population who wouldn't even feel horrible if they were described as a woman or as a pregnant woman. I think a lot of the times it's a nonsensical thing done for very poor reasons that's having a terrible impact.
Well, I find it amazing that there needs to even be the conversation, really. It seems pretty straightforward. And I mean, you heard what Boris Johnson said, which he said to his credit that what would be sensible. And I'm with him. It's just what's sensible. It's not about, and as Debbie said, it's not about hurting someone's feelings, or you've got hurty feelings, I'm sorry for saying. It's got to be more about the actual reality of the situation. And the reality is that the male physiology is very different from female physiology, and no matter what you do, so for example, in the case of Leah Thomas, it's not fair for somebody, a biological man, to race against a biological woman in that respect, because first of all, men have usually bigger lungs, wider hips, the hips are different, everything is different, which means that women are at a disadvantage.
Surely the genitals cause drag in the water, which is a disadvantage.
On the note of Nana just said, I do think it's important for us to say, or I would like to say at least, to give credit to the Conservative government for saying, actually, this is simple. A woman is an adult human female, because we criticise them when they don't stand up for these things, and now that they have, I think it's good. Thank you. The Labour Party need to follow suit.
Yeah, Keir Starmer couldn't say that, could he? But anyway, listen, today I'm asking, he wouldn't even define woman. Should we create bespoke spaces for trans people? And lots of you have been getting in touch with your views. Tom says, I think this would be a fair way of sorting out the whole thing. Dave says, why do you always go on about transgender people? Just let them live their lives. Listen, is that a gentleman that said that? You see, Dave, that's the thing.
Dave.
You would say that, Dave. You see. But if you're a woman and you might feel intimidated in a female-only space, then you might be thinking very differently.
Well, we don't know what Dave identifies as.
Well, no, I don't know what Dave identifies.
We can assume his gender.
But I'm going to make an assumption that Dave is a man.
Yeah, well,
but Dave, you can get back in touch if you're not. Mary says, I think we should or could have 3 spaces, male, female and unisex, or free for all when it comes to toilets for everyone and anyone to use. We should also change the male-female toilet signs to indicate a more masculine silhouette for men and a more feminine one for females, and just a neutral one for unisex. I'm not too worried about the shapes of things, but but I hear you. Yolanda says, I think you're getting into dangerous territory whenever you talk about some kind of segregation or of a protected group. Well, women are a protected group, actually, as well. And it's not segregation, it's just a way of keeping everybody safe. I think that's what we're talking about here. We're not talking about, it's when the situation could arise that could make one or the other group feel vulnerable.